The American wilderness is a paradox. It is a place of breathtaking beauty, drawing millions of visitors every year to its national parks, mountains, and forests. Yet beneath the canopy of trees and the majesty of the peaks, there lies a silent, predatory danger. Every single year, the number of people who go missing on public lands reaches into the hundreds of thousands. While the vast majority of these cases are resolved within days, with the lost hikers finding their way back or being rescued, there remains a small, chilling percentage of cases that defy explanation. These are the people who vanish without a footprint, leaving behind no physical evidence, only a void filled with rumors and grief. Of all these unsolved mysteries, few are as perplexing or as heartbreaking as the case of a 12-year-old boy named Jared Negrete. To truly understand the gravity of Jared's story, we must first dispel a common myth that only the foolish or the inexperienced go missing. The wilderness does not discriminate. Consider the case of Timothy Barnes in 1988. Barnes was 25 years old, a towering man at 6'4" and an expert outdoorsman. He set out for a hike in Yosemite National Park, eyeing for the Polydome Lakes. He was on a trail that was well marked and not particularly far from civilization. Yet, he never arrived. Despite his skills and strength, he vanished, and not a single piece of his gear was ever recovered. Then there is the 2015 case of Morgan Heimer, a professional rafting guide on the Colorado River. During a routine stop, Heimer, still wearing his life vest and helmet, stepped behind a tree to talk to a client or perhaps take a break. He was never seen again. In the blink of an eye, a trained professional was erased from the landscape. If the wild can swallow experienced men whole, what chance does a child have? Jared was not an athlete or a hiker. He was a gentle, curious boy from El Monte, California. Born in 1978, he joined the Boy Scouts to experience nature outside of city life. In July 1991, his troop set out to conquer Mount San Gorgonio, the highest peak in Southern California. While the mountain is beautiful, it is unforgiving, and Jared was ill-equipped for such a rugged trek. He was wearing high-top sneakers instead of hiking boots. He lacked his prescription glasses, and being slightly overweight, he was not conditioned for the high altitude. The trouble began on the second day of the hike. As the group pushed toward the 11,500-foot summit, Jared began to lag behind. The troop leader, Dennis Knight, made a decision that would be heavily criticized later. The group separated. Whether Knight told Jared to wait or intended to pick him up on the way back, the result was the same. Jared was left alone, in the wilderness. Jared didn't stay put. Witnesses, including a firefighter, spotted the boy wandering off-trail at around 10,000 feet. They warned him to get back on the path, but later reports suggest he was seen running between switchbacks, looking confused and possibly trying to catch up with his friends. As the sun set and the troop descended, Jared was nowhere to be found. A massive search operation was launched the very next morning. For weeks, search and rescue teams, helicopters, and trackers scoured 130 square miles of treacherous terrain. The first major clue was a shoe print matching Jared's sneakers. It was found dangerously close to a steep drop-off. But the most significant discovery came days later: his backpack. Found roughly 45 feet off the trail, the backpack contained beef jerky, candy wrappers, and his camera. The contents of the camera were developed immediately. The first few photos were standard landscapes, but the final picture was terrifying. It was a close-up of Jared's face, taken at night with a flash. It showed only his eyes and nose, capturing a look of fear and confusion in the pitch black. Why did he leave his food and supplies behind? Why was no body ever found? The most logical theory is that Jared succumbed to altitude sickness. This condition can cause hallucinations and irrational behavior. This might explain why he abandoned his gear. He may have then fallen into a ravine or dense vegetation where his body remains hidden. Others suggest animal activity, such as mountain lions, but the lack of torn clothing or blood makes this unlikely. Then there are the darker theories. The region has a history of strange disappearances, leading some to speculate about foul play or even something paranormal. However, these remain only theories. Years later, another hiker named William Parvin went missing in the same area. He experienced severe hallucinations due to dehydration and altitude. Parvin survived to tell his tale. His story offers a glimpse into what Jared might have endured: confusion, fear, and a loss of reality. However, unlike Parvin, Jared never came home. The negligence of leaving a child alone in the wild, combined with the unforgiving terrain, resulted in a tragedy that still haunts the hiking community. Today, Jared Negrete remains a part of the mountain's mystery. His final photograph serves as a chilling reminder of how quickly the wilderness can turn on us. More than 30 years later, the question remains: what happened to Jared Negrete? The Silent Mountain, the vanishing of Jared Negrete. Prologue: The Wilderness Paradox. The American West is a landscape of paradoxes. It is a place of undeniable, breathtaking beauty, a tapestry of towering granite peaks, ancient forests, and sprawling deserts that have stood silent for millennia. It is a place where people go to find themselves, to escape the noise of the modern world, and to touch something primal and pure. But there is a shadow side to this beauty. The wilderness is indifferent to human life. It does not care if you are experienced or a novice, strong or weak, an adult or a child. It operates on the laws of physics and biology, laws that can turn deadly in the span of a single afternoon. Every year, hundreds of thousands of people are reported missing in the United States. The vast majority of these cases are solved quickly. A wrong turn is corrected, a stranded hiker is rescued, or a runaway returns home. But deep within the files of the National Park Service and local sheriff's departments, there exists a subset of cases that defy logic. These are the anomalies. These are the cases where people do not just get lost, they seem to evaporate. There are no tracks, no scent for the dogs to follow, no torn clothing, just a void where a human being used to be. Among these haunting mysteries, few are as poignant or as baffling as the disappearance of 12-year-old Jared Negrete. It is a story that combines the innocence of youth with the terrifying vastness of nature, a story of a single mistake compounding into a tragedy that has remained unsolved for more than 30 decades. This is the story of the boy who walked up a mountain and never walked down. Chapter 1. The Boy from El Monte. To understand the tragedy, we must first understand the boy. Jared Michael Negrete was not your typical rugged outdoorsman. Born on September 11, 1978, into a loving, working-class family in El Monte, California, Jared was a child of the suburbs. He was gentle, introspective, and possessed a quiet curiosity about the world. He was the kind of boy who was more comfortable with a book in his hands than navigating a steep, scree slope. Physically, Jared was soft. At 12 years old, he stood 5 feet 2 inches tall and weighed around 150 pounds. By the standards of the time, and certainly by the standards of high-altitude hiking, he was considered overweight. He wore thick prescription glasses, without which the world was a blur of shapes and colors. He was a sweet kid, deeply loved by his parents Felipe and Linda, and his siblings. But Jared wanted to be more. He wanted to challenge himself. Like many boys his age, he looked to the Boy Scouts of America as a path to adventure. The Scouts promised a break from the concrete of El Monte. They promised campfire stories, camaraderie, and the skills to survive in the wild. Jared's troop was affiliated with the Mormon Church, providing a wholesome, faith-based environment that his parents trusted implicitly. In the summer of 1991, Jared was preparing for the biggest adventure of his young life. His troop was heading to Camp Taquitz, a well-known scout camp nestled in the San Bernardino Mountains. The highlight of the trip was to be a summit attempt of Mount San Gorgonio. Known locally as Old Grayback, San Gorgonio is a beast of a mountain. Rising to 11,503 feet, it is the highest peak in Southern California. It is not a technical climb requiring ropes and crampons during the summer, but it is a grueling test of endurance. The air at the summit holds significantly less oxygen than at sea level. The trails are steep, rocky, and unforgiving. As Jared packed his bag on the morning of July 19, 1991, there was an air of excitement, but also a critical oversight. Jared packed his scout uniform, his canteen, some beef jerky, candy, and a small compact camera to document his triumph. But on his feet, he laced up a pair of high-topped basketball sneakers. To a 12-year-old, they looked like sports shoes. To an experienced mountaineer, they were a disaster waiting to happen. They offered no grip on loose gravel, no ankle support for jagged rocks, and no protection against the elements. With his glasses perched on his nose and his pack slung over his shoulders, Jared Negrete waved goodbye to his parents. He was ready to conquer the mountain. The mountain, however, was waiting for him. Chapter 2. The Ascent. The morning of July 19, 1991, broke with the crisp, clear light typical of high-altitude California summers. The troop, consisting of Jared, 4 other scouts, and their troop leader, Dennis Knight, arrived at the trailhead. They chose the Vivian Creek Trail. It is widely considered the steepest and most scenic route to the summit. The trail begins deceptively, crossing a wide, rocky creek bed before shooting upward into a series of punishing switchbacks. For an experienced hiker, it is a challenge. For a 12-year-old boy carrying extra weight and lacking aerobic conditioning, it was a gauntlet. The group moved out. The sound of crunching gravel and teenage chatter filled the air. The lower elevations were hot, dusty, and dry. As they climbed, the vegetation changed. The scrub oak gave way to towering pines and firs. The air grew cooler, but also thinner. For the first few hours, adrenaline likely kept Jared going. The camaraderie of the scouts, the desire to not look weak in front of his peers, pushed him forward. But as the group ascended past 8,000 feet, the physiological reality set in. Altitude is a silent thief. It steals your breath, then your energy, and finally, your clarity of mind. Jared began to lag. His chest heaved with the effort of pulling oxygen from the thinning air. His legs, heavy and unaccustomed to such steep grades, began to burn. The group dynamic, typical of young boys, was to push ahead, to race to the top. Jared, however, was anchoring them. He was the slow link. By late afternoon, the sun was beginning its slow descent toward the western horizon, casting long shadows through the pine trees. They were nearing the summit push, but Jared was exhausted. He was done. Chapter 3. The Fatal Decision. It was around 6 p.m. when the situation reached a critical juncture. The group was stretched out along the trail. Jared had fallen significantly behind the main pack. This moment remains the subject of scrutiny and heartbreak. The fundamental rule of the Boy Scouts is the buddy system. No scout is ever left alone. Yet, on the slopes of San Gorgonio, that rule was broken. Troop leader Dennis Knight was faced with a dilemma. He had a group of eager boys wanting to summit, and one boy who physically couldn't make it. Knight made a decision. Reports vary slightly on the exact exchange, but the consensus is that Knight decided to leave Jared behind. Some accounts suggest Jared was told to stay at a specific spot and rest while the others tagged the summit and returned. Others suggest Knight intended to summit quickly and pick him up on the way down. Whatever the specific wording, the result was the catastrophic isolation of a child. Jared Negrete was left alone. He was at approximately 10,000 feet. He was tired, thirsty, and likely humiliated that he couldn't keep up. But worse than the physical fatigue was the setting. As the voices of his troop faded up the trail, a profound silence would have descended upon him. In the wilderness, silence is heavy. It presses against the ears. Jared sat for a while, but then something happened. Perhaps he felt better after resting. Perhaps he panicked about being left behind. Perhaps the early stages of altitude sickness, which can cause confusion and poor judgment, began to cloud his mind. Jared stood up, and instead of staying put, he began to walk. Chapter 4. The Witness. We know Jared moved because he was seen. The trails of San Gorgonio are popular, and even on a Friday evening, there were other hikers on the mountain. One of them was a firefighter from Santa Ana. This witness provided investigators with a crucial yet frustrating piece of the puzzle. The firefighter was descending the mountain when he spotted a young boy matching Jared's description. But the boy wasn't on the trail. He was off-trail, navigating through the brush and rocks. The firefighter called out to him. He told the boy, "You need to get back on the trail. It's dangerous to cut switchbacks." It is a common mistake for inexperienced hikers. They see the trail winding back and forth and think they can save time by cutting straight down or up through the middle. In reality, this destroys the trail and often leads hikers into dangerous, unstable terrain. Jared purportedly looked at the man. He didn't ask for help. He didn't say he was lost. He simply continued. Later, other hikers reported seeing a boy running, not walking, running. He was darting between the trees, frantic. Was he playing a game? Was he trying to catch up to his leader? Or was he already in the grip of panic, the rationality of his mind slipping away as the oxygen levels in his blood dropped? This was the last time anyone is confirmed to have seen Jared Negrete alive. Chapter 5. The Vanishing. Sunset on July 19, 1991 was around 8 p.m. Twilight lingers in the high mountains, turning the sky a bruised purple before plunging the world into absolute darkness. Dennis Knight and the other scouts reached the summit. They celebrated briefly to end the view and then began their descent. They expected to find Jared where they had left him, or perhaps hiking slowly upward to meet them. They reached the spot. It was empty. Knight likely felt a surge of cold dread. He shouted Jared's name. "Jared! Jared!" The only response was the wind whistling through the limber pines. The troop searched the immediate area. They hiked down the trail, expecting to find him further along. Mile after mile, the trail remained empty. By the time they reached the bottom of the mountain, it was fully dark. The reality of the situation crashed down upon them. Jared was not with them. He was alone on the mountain, in the dark, with no warm clothing, no flashlight, and no shelter. Knight alerted the authorities. The nightmare had begun. Chapter 6. The Army on the Mountain. The response was immediate and massive. The disappearance of a child in a national forest triggers an emergency level that rivals a natural disaster. By the morning of Saturday, July 20th, the base of Mount San Gorgonio resembled a military encampment. The San Bernardino County Sheriff's Department took the lead. They were joined by specialized search and rescue teams from across California. Helicopters equipped with FLIR, or forward-looking infrared technology, chopped through the sky. These cameras can detect the heat signature of a rabbit from thousands of feet up. They scanned the tree line, looking for the glowing silhouette of a boy. On the ground, bloodhounds and German shepherds were deployed. These dogs can track a scent that is days old. Hundreds of volunteers, including experienced mountaineers, lined up shoulder to shoulder to grid search the terrain, walking in lockstep to ensure not a single square foot was missed. The parents, Felipe and Linda, arrived at the command center. One can only imagine the agony of their vigil. Every time a radio crackled, their hearts must have stopped, hoping for the words, "We found him." But the mountain was stubborn. San Gorgonio is not a manicured park. It is 130 square miles of wilderness. It is filled with drainages, steep V-shaped canyons that act as funnels. It is covered in manzanita, a dense, tangled shrub that is nearly impossible to walk through and can easily hide a body from aerial view. The first day passed. Nothing. The second day passed. Nothing. The optimism of the first 24 hours began to curdle into desperation. Chapter 7. The Footprint and the Backpack. Then, a breakthrough. High up on the mountain, near the 10,000-foot mark, a search team found a footprint. It was a sneaker print, the tread pattern notching the high tops Jared was wearing. The location of the print was alarming. It was not on the trail. It was on a steep, loose slope leading down into a rugged canyon. It suggested that Jared had indeed left the safety of the path and had ventured into the treacherous terrain known as the Dollar Lake area, or perhaps towards the dangerous North Face. The search intensified in that sector. Days later, on July 27th, a full week after he vanished, the most significant and haunting discovery was made. Searchers scrambling down a steep incline found a backpack. It was Jared's backpack. It was lying on the ground, seemingly discarded. Investigators carefully opened it, treating it like a crime scene. Inside, they found the beef jerky. They found the candy wrappers. The food was uneaten. This was a baffling clue. If Jared was lost and starving, why would he abandon his only source of food? Why would he take off his backpack? Paradoxical undressing and irrational behavior are hallmarks of severe hypothermia, but the weather had been mild. However, these are also symptoms of HACE, or high-altitude cerebral edema, a severe form of altitude sickness. When the brain swells due to lack of oxygen, victims become confused, clumsy, and often discard essential gear because it feels too heavy, or they simply forget what it is. But inside the backpack was one more item, an item that would turn this case from a tragedy into a haunting mystery. Jared's camera. Chapter 8. The Eyes in the Dark. The sheriff's department rushed the film to a lab to be developed. They hoped the photos would provide a timeline, perhaps showing landmarks that would pinpoint Jared's route. The first 11 photos were standard, blurry shots of the trees, the trail, the backs of the other scouts. They were the typical photos of a 12-year-old on a trip. Then came the 12th photo, the final exposure on the roll. It was taken at night. The photo was a close-up self-portrait. In the days before smartphones and selfies, this meant turning the camera around and guessing the angle. The flash had fired, illuminating Jared's face against a backdrop of pitch-black nothingness. The image was poorly framed. It showed mostly his nose and his eyes, but it was the expression in those eyes that haunted the investigators. It wasn't the goofy face of a kid playing around. It was wide-eyed, startled, terrified. Why did he take the photo? Was he using the flash as a momentary flashlight to see where he was? Was he trying to leave a record of himself, knowing he might not survive? Or did he hear something in the darkness, a twig snap, a growl, a footstep, and instinctively point the camera and press the button? The photo confirmed one terrible fact. Jared Negrete was alive when the sun went down on that first night. He survived the initial separation. He was alone in the dark, terrified, but alive. Chapter 9. The Silence Returns. The discovery of the backpack reinvigorated the search. If the bag was here, the boy must be nearby. They tore that canyon apart. They lowered searchers on ropes into crevices. They poked sticks into every bush. They flew over the area until the pilots were dizzy. But there was nothing else. No shoes, no glasses, no clothing, no bones. It was as if Jared had set his backpack down, snapped a picture, and then dissolved into the atmosphere. On August 4th, 1991, after 16 days of exhaustive effort, the official search was suspended. It was one of the largest searches in California history, logging over 45,000 man-hours. Jared Negrete was presumed dead, a victim of the mountain. Chapter 10. The Echoes. William Parvin. The story might have ended there, fading into a sad footnote of local history. But 10 years later, the mountain offered a strange parallel. In 2001, a 17-year-old hiker named William Parvin went missing in the exact same area of Mount San Gorgonio. Like Jared, he separated from his group to summit alone. Like Jared, he vanished. Jared's parents, hearing the news, drove back to the mountain. They wanted to support the Parvin family, reliving their own nightmare. But William Parvin was lucky. Days after disappearing, he was found alive. His story provided a terrifying glimpse into what likely happened to Jared. Parvin told rescuers that he began to suffer from altitude sickness. He became delirious. He hallucinated. He wandered miles off course, convinced he was walking toward a town that didn't exist. He fell off a small cliff. He drank from a stream and got sick. Parvin's account proved that the mountain could scramble a human mind. It gave credence to the theory that Jared, suffering from the same lack of oxygen, had wandered irrationally, perhaps traveling much further or into much steeper terrain than anyone calculated. Chapter 11. Theories of the Unknown. Decades have passed, and with no body ever recovered, theories continue to swirl around the fate of Jared Negrete. Number 1. The natural trap. The most plausible theory is gravity. The terrain around the backpack site is treacherous. If Jared, blinded without his glasses and confused by altitude sickness, took a step in the wrong direction, he could have fallen into a deep fissure or a hollow beneath the dense scrub. Bodies in such terrain can be covered by falling debris or vegetation, effectively burying them. Number 2. Predation. San Gorgonio is home to mountain lions and black bears. A lone, small child running, as witnesses saw, triggers a predator's chase instinct. However, predation leaves a mess. Clothes are torn, gear is scattered. The pristine condition of the backpack and the lack of blood evidence make this less likely, though not impossible. 3. The missing 411 phenomenon. David Paulides, a former police detective and author, has popularized the Missing 411 series, which documents strange disappearances in national parks. He often cites the Jared Negrete case. He points to the anomalies, the failure of the dogs to track a scent, the separation from the group, the strange location of the gear, and the inclement weather that often follows such disappearances, though the weather was mild for Jared. While mainstream investigators dismiss these links, online communities speculate about everything from feral humans to paranormal portals. 4. The human element. Could someone have taken him? It was a busy weekend. Could a predator in human form have found a lost, crying boy and led him away? It would explain the lack of remains on the mountain. But it doesn't explain the backpack found deep in the wilderness. Why would an abductor hike miles off-trail to plant a backpack? Epilogue. The mountain keeps its secrets. Today, the Vivian Creek Trail is still popular. Hikers still trudge up the switchbacks, gasping for air, eager to reach the summit. Most of them have no idea that they are walking through the ghost of a massive search operation. Dennis Knight, the troop leader, lived with the heavy burden of that day for the rest of his life. The Negrete family has had to learn to live with the void, the empty chair at the table, the birthday that comes and goes without a celebration. The case remains open, technically. Every now and then, a hiker finds a bone or a piece of fabric, and the sheriff's department investigates. But so far, it is always a deer bone or a piece of old trash. Jared Negrete's story is a tragedy of errors. It serves as a grim curriculum for every scout troop and hiking group. Never separate. But beyond the lesson, there is the mystery. Somewhere on the high, lonely slopes of Mount San Gorgonio, hidden by the rocks and the pines, the truth is waiting. Until it is found, Jared Negrete remains the boy in the dark, frozen in the flash of a camera, forever 12 years old, waiting for the dawn that never came. The wilderness is beautiful, but it is also a keeper of secrets, and Jared is its most heartbreaking secret of all.